Hi, welcome to A Film Darkly. I'm your host, Anthony Paceno, and in today's episode, I'm going to talk about Batman vs. Superman. This is a movie that was very, very divided amongst audiences. A lot of people didn't care for it, and then there was a small percentage of people that did. I would say it was kind of like a 70-30. The ultimate cut kind of seemed to lean people more toward liking the film. For myself, though, I kind of enjoyed it from the first time I saw it in theaters. I actually liked the theatrical release, even though I saw all the editing issues with it. And the ultimate cut, I would have to say, is probably one of my favorite movies to come out last year. If we were able to count the ultimate cut, I would definitely have put it pretty high up there. But part of the reason is because of what I'm going to talk about today. Some of the aspects of the film that are really thickly woven within it that are just deeply philosophical and interesting, to say the least. So you kind of have an interesting scenario here where you have Superman, who's playing the Christ-like figure, and you have Luthor, who hates the Christ-like figure for no other reason than just to simply say that, as he tells Senator June, that power is innocent, that power is not innocent, is basically, he tells her that the greatest lie in America is that power is not innocent. And this is Luthor essentially trying to say that power can never honestly be neutral in any situation. It is almost always something that will gravitate toward evil and can hardly gravitate toward all good. It's just not really necessary. It can't necessarily go that direction. So he talks about power throughout probably most of the film, and he doesn't really get to his biggest issue with Superman until a little bit later in the movie, when he's actually talking to Superman on top of his roof of LexCorp. But before that, we kind of just get little bits of history, like his dad lived in Germany, had to wave flags at tyrants, and so he feels that it's only proper that he being his father's son, would come across kryptonite, that he should be the one to have this deterrent against heroes. And at first they're kind of like questioning what he's trying to do, but to him it's a deterrent against all metahumans, and that he believes that there are many metahumans out there, which we obviously find out he knows, because he knows about Cyborg, Flash, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman. And so he's very aware that there are metahumans in the world, and he just thinks that if you have this one silver bullet, so to speak, then, as he states, you don't have to depend on the kindness of monsters. So in other words, we don't have to depend on whether or not Superman's going to continue to do the right thing. We can actually go ahead and say to ourselves, you know what, let's have this just in case. And he thinks the just in case is a good idea. But what he's not telling the senator is he's not really thinking a just in case scenario. He's thinking we have to kill Superman. And there's a lot of religious undertones. And some of it's not undertone at all. Some of it's just very, very blatant. But Luthor is kind of like, he's sort of like this individual who's just really, really angry with the fact that God has not prevented or cannot prevent certain things. And it's not so much that he blames God in the sense that, well, if God exists, why is there evil in the world? It's more like he sees it as a paradox. He sees it as you can never have that much power and hold it over everyone's heads, because you're almost always going to lack in some way. Your power will always lack. So I'm going to play this one quote from the film, or this one scene from the film, and it kind of like gives the gist of everything Luthor believes concerning Superman and essentially God.
Boy, do we have problems up here. The problem of evil in the world. The problem of absolute virtue.
I'll take you in without breaking you, which is more than you deserve.
The problem of you on top of everything else. You above all. Because that's what God is. Horus, Apollo, Jehovah, Kal-El, Clark, Joseph, Kent. See, what we call God depends upon our tribe, Clark Joe. Because God is tribal. God takes sides. No man in the sky intervened when I was a boy to deliver me from Daddy's fist and abominations. I figured out way back. God is all powerful. He cannot be all good. And if he is all good, then he cannot be all powerful. And neither can you be.
So you have it right there. He's essentially saying, that you can never ever have all power and be all good. It's just, it's not really possible. And if he is all good, then he's not all powerful. So in his eyes, it's either there is no God, or if there is a God, that God is essentially evil. And so in his eyes, here you have Superman, who is that God, who is an embodiment of God. And he feels like the only way I could get really, the only way I can make things right is if I kill God, or if I at least expose him to the world, which was he goes on to actually say that when he tells Kal-El that, he has his mother captive, Martha. And so one of the things I thought was interesting was in his quote. And there's a part where he says, Apollo, Horus, Jehovah, and Kal-El. And I thought it was really, really intriguing that he threw Jehovah in there, God, with these other three, who are all clearly deities and not the same as God. That's one of the things that always kind of bothers me when people are talking negative about theology, is they'll sit there and say, well, what's the difference between God and like Odin or Thor or Apollo or, all these various gods, or Zeus? And it's like, the difference is all those gods aren't really gods. They're more like deities. They're more like these beings that just have supreme power, but they're not necessarily God. Not in the same light. So Luthor's already kind of comparing God wrongly, I guess you could say. At best, Jehovah could be referring to the more anthropomorphic God that you see within the Old Testament, but even that version of God is hard to pin as being human, like Zeus is human, like Kal-El is human, or like Horus is human. Horus is usually more commonly compared to Jesus Christ as opposed to God, because Horus operated more like that. So it's kind of interesting that he makes that comparison. It almost makes me wonder if he really even understands the concept of God. Now that just might be like a writing error where they just feel the need to make that comparison. Maybe that's the case. I mean, in X-Men Apocalypse, you have the Apocalypse character saying he's been known by many names, and he mentions Elohim, which is the name of God, or one of the God's names. It actually has a meaning to it. It's not really God's name. And then he states Krishna. And Krishna is kind of an interesting character to throw in there, because Krishna is supposed to be a representation of Brahma in some interpretations, or is just simply another figure and is more better compared to Jesus than compared to God. So I thought that was interesting how he kind of in a way contradicts himself, or he doesn't really understand what he's talking about himself. But then he talks about how when he's young, his dad, God basically didn't save him from the fist of his father, so to speak. And so we kind of get a good glimpse into why psychologically Luthor is the way he is, and he hates the concept of God, because God to him cannot possibly be all powerful, because if he is, then he's not all good, which means he needs to be destroyed if he exists, because he's too powerful and he's going to be evil. Or God isn't all powerful and is all good, but then if he's not all powerful, he's not God. so he's no threat. So for him, it's kind of like, here's Superman, who's essentially like God, quote unquote, and he's can't be all good. He has to be evil too. That means I must destroy him because he's partially evil. And so that's kind of the paradox of Luthor. And later on, Luthor talks about when he's creating Doomsday, he talks about sin. And he says that he doesn't hate the sinner. He hates the sin, which is something you'll hear Christians say. And he says, and your sin is existence. Now that's intriguing for him to tell Superman, your sin is existence. And essentially he's going back to the whole God thing, that you're too powerful. And because you're all powerful, you can't possibly be all good. So your sin is that you exist. Your sin is that you're as powerful as you are. And because you can't help but be that strong, it's your existence. And so, he gives Batman the opportunity to do it. And he says if man won't do it, then the devil will. And so obviously in his mind, the devil is another all-powerful being as strong as God. Now, there's many theological issues here. Anyone who's very steep or knows a lot about theology knows that the devil character isn't really powerful like God. He's an angel, so he's under God, and he's a fallen one at that. And you actually have the book of Job that kind of gives you a good depiction of the relationship between the devil and God, which is to say that the devil can't really touch anyone whom God hasn't lifted his hand from, so to speak. So obviously that goes back to some of the issues of whether or not God can actually be good because he's allowing the devil to do what he does. But the book of Job is just one single story concerning the devil. But the devil's story is just, the devil is just interesting. It's really interesting because there is this like story of the devil within the scripture, and all at the same time you kind of get this story that tells you the devil's restricted. But then in New Testament you'll find a lot of the devil, watch out for the devil looks to sift you as wheat, and the devil lurks around like a lion seeking whom he may devour, and things like that. So it's kind of interesting, the devil character within theology. But I just thought I would point that out, that it was interesting that he's like, oh, the devil will do it, because in reality, well, not in reality, but according to theology, the devil couldn't do it. The devil can't kill God. It's not really possible. People always depict the devil as living in hell and ruling hell, and Scripture actually makes very clearly actually that the hell is just as much the devil's prison cell as it would be for any human being. So the devil does not rule hell whatsoever. The devil doesn't know of hell, or does know of hell, and knows one day he'll be locked up there. And so that's kind of the idea, is the devil isn't really what people think in terms of like being this opposite power next to that of God. The devil's a far different character, and in some ways written very allegorically throughout Scripture, which makes you wonder, is Scripture attempting to say that there really is a being named the devil who's actually doing what he's doing, or is the devil merely the idea that whenever you go against God or go against God's wishes, you're participating with the devil? So a very interesting idea and thought there from Luthor. So Luthor, we know, ultimately fails in his plan, but that is his plan, is to kill God due to the fact that he believes God to be evil if he's powerful. And if he's not, then he's not God, so he's not a threat. So he's not dealing with that aspect. He's dealing with the aspect of God being real and God being powerful, and saying we have to kill God because God allows evil in the world. No one can ascend to that much power. So it's a very interesting complex on the side of Luthor, and why Luthor is the way he is, especially since his fear of this power comes from, or his fear of of this power and his fear of like, or what he thinks about God, comes from the fact that his dad obviously didn't treat him very good when he was a child. So that's kind of his complex and what you start to understand about him. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and move on to Batman. Now, Batman has a very different, a different idea concerning Superman. It's not so much that he doesn't think there's something in particularly wrong there. He does think that. And there's actually a few quotes, but you have this part with Batman and Alfred at the very, very start of the film where Alfred's telling him how things have changed and how ever since Superman has emerged, that now all of a sudden there's something different going on with you, and it turns good men cruel is his actual the main point of his line. And so he's obviously talking about his master. He's talking about, or his boss, or whatever you want to call him. Master just sounds so bad because it's like a slave. But anyways, but Alfred's basically telling Batman, you've become cruel because of this guy, because of what this guy has turned in you. And if you see if you watch that scene, you'll notice the face of Bruce is kind of like a little upset, like bothered, because he knows Alfred is indirectly talking about him. We eventually find out that Batman is trying to figure out what the white Portuguese is, to which the white Portuguese is kryptonite. And he finds out about kryptonite, and he knows about kryptonite, and he wants to get a hold of it so he could kill Superman. And Alfred is kind of like, you want to go to war with this guy? And Bruce is like, he brought the war to us. And he tells Alfred, if there's even a slight possibility that this guy could turn his back on us, we have to take it as absolute certainty that he will, because he's so powerful. He's too powerful. So it's going back to this power not being innocent thing, where Batman sort of has the same issue with him that Luthor has, which is he's too powerful. When you're that powerful, you cannot possibly be all good. There's going to be evil that's going to fall into place or into plan. But see, there's a difference between Batman and Lex. And that's that for Luthor, Superman's very existence is innately going to be evil to some degree. And so because of that paradox, he has to destroy the god. But for Batman, it's the inability to see Superman as anything more than an outsider, as anything more than a man who has come out of the sky, than an alien. And that's his big issue. So eventually we have this scene before they fight where Batman is talking to Alfred, and he's telling Alfred about the past, and he's saying this may be the greatest thing I ever do. And Alfred's like, wait a minute, but you've been beating criminals for over 20 years now. Does that not count for something? And he's like, criminals are like weeds. You pull one out, another one grows in its place. And he's like, this is our future I'm talking about. This is defending our future. So for him, it's this idea of this guy might be saving children out of trees or cats out of trees and maybe saving children from burning buildings right now. But when he gets pissed off enough, we have to be careful, because he could burn the whole world down in a second, and we can't do anything to stop him. So that's Batman's real concern, and Batman at this point doesn't see him much as human. So I'm going to go ahead and play some of the clips from their fight. They have when they have their fight, there's a few things Batman says in there, and it's sort of what lets us know Batman's thoughts on Superman.
Breathe it in. That's fear. You're
So in that first part, he says, "You're not brave, men are brave." And, he tells him that's fear, when he's breathing in the kryptonite gases. And what Batman's essentially saying right there is, you are Superman. You're all powerful. The fact bullets bounce off of you, fire doesn't burn your skin, says you cannot be brave. Now, why is that? Well, the reason is because Superman has nothing to fear. There's a difference between a firefighter having to break into a building to save a little girl and Superman having to do it. The difference is, with all the firefighters' training, he still can get burned. He still can get hurt, and he could still be killed. But Superman can't be. He's got nothing to fear. Nothing to fear at all. So how can you be brave when you don't have to fear? How? That's one of the paradoxes of Superman. And why Batman has a hard time seeing him as a man. Because he's like, you don't have to fear like I have to fear. So you don't understand when you do things that you think are helping, but in perspective are destroying. So similarly to what we see at the end of Man of Steel, where all these people are murdered or killed because of his fight with General Zod. So here's the second part to this, and I'm going to go ahead and play 2 clips back to back. And it's Batman talking to Superman still during the fight.
I bet your parents taught you that you mean something. That you're here for a reason. My parents taught me a different lesson. Dying in the gutter for no reason at all. They taught me the world only makes sense if you force it to.
So that's a really, really interesting quote, because it's not really going on with Superman, not really being a man. But instead he's like, the world only makes sense if you force it to. So is he trying to say that human beings being good, or always being good, can never really make sense unless you force that to be the case? So Superman kind of forcing in a way the world to be good due to his ability to save everyone? So is this a matter of Superman, will never be able to force the world to be good, or will never be able to make sense of the world unless he forces it? And thus, because he's Superman and he tries to make sense of the world by forcing it, he will only in turn destroy it? And I think that is what Batman's saying. He's saying you can't force the world to make sense. He watched his parents dying in the gutter because he realized, and he thought to himself, that doesn't make sense. Why are my parents dying? And me, I can actually reflect on this myself. When I was 15 years old, my father died. And that's how it felt to me. How does this make sense? This doesn't make sense. So the only way the world makes sense is if you force it to. Whether that be believing in something that is really nonsensical, but you do because it makes sense of the world. Whether that means trying to do something and force something into the world. So you're always forcing something onto how you observe the world so that the world can make sense to you. Otherwise, it will never make sense. And in retrospect, he's telling Superman, you are going to try to force the world to make sense like anyone else does. And when you do, you are only going to hurt the world. Because with you, force, there's a price that comes with force. But see, there's the scene where Batman is about to kill Superman. And he's telling Superman, you were never a god. You're not even a man. And so he's essentially saying, well, it's pretty straightforward. He's saying, you're not a man. You can't be brave. You can't be these things. So see, Superman's problem, Batman rather, his problem is not the same as Lex Luthor, where he thinks power can never be innocent. His problem with Superman is that he doesn't think Superman's connected to the world. And I've already said this, but I want to make sure that's well known, that he thinks Superman is disconnected from the world. Now, there's a quote from Batman at the very, very end of the movie that shows you how he changed his mind and what he thinks of mankind. And it kind of goes deeper into what it is he must have thought of mankind, and now what he thinks of mankind, and how he even perceives Superman. But first, I'm going to go into Superman. Now, Superman is the Christ figure. But Superman's an interesting Christ figure because he's kind of like this Christ figure who doesn't really want to be Christ. Who doesn't really... He wants to be connected to humanity. He's trying to find his place. And his best connection with humanity is actually with Lois Lane. So this is why there's this whole story in there where he sees his dad up at a mountaintop. And his dad's telling him this story about how there was some... You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and play the quote for you because I think it's better if you hear it from the dad instead, from Kevin Costner's part in the movie as Jonathan Kent.
Something, isn't it? I mean, can't just live on a pancake, so we come to the mountains. All downhill from here. Down to the floodplain. Farm at the bottom of the world. I remember one season the water came bad. I couldn't have been 12. Dad had out the shovels and we went at it all night. We worked till I think I fainted. But we managed to stop the water. We saved the farm. Your grandma baked me cake. Said I was a hero. Later that day we found out we blocked the water all right. We sent it upstream. The whole Lang farm washed away. While I ate my hero cake, their horses were drowning. I used to hear them wailing in my sleep.
Did the nightmares ever stop?
Yeah. When I met your mother, she gave me faith that there's good in this world. She was my world. I miss you, son. I miss you too, Dad.
So there you have the story with his dad and about the water being pushed a different direction. So this is kind of an allegory on Superman and how Jonathan Kent knows that Clark's biggest issue is always going to be that when he tries to do right, he may very well just be pushing the waters upstream and drowning someone else. And that's the problem, is every time he tries to do right, there's always going to be a wrong. Now, this is kind of Lex's paradox. Lex saying he can't always be good. But see, what Lex doesn't realize, and even what Batman doesn't realize, is Superman is more human than they think. He does recognize this problem, and it's what's hurting him. It's bothering him, because this scene actually comes after he goes to the courtroom, and the courtroom explodes, and he never sees the bomb. And he doesn't see it because, as we see in the Ultimate Cut, the wheelchair that had contained the bomb was lead-lined, So he can't see through, obviously Superman can't see through lead. So that's the reason why he had no idea. And so for him, he's in this weird spot where he's like, what do I do? I have the ability to save people, but every time I do, I hurt people. And so there's this part I wanted to play where they kind of go through a montage of Superman saving people, and at the same time you have like CNN and MSNBC and I don't know if Fox News is in there, but you have all these major news networks, and they're having discussions about Superman, kind of like we really would in real life, and so there's all these various individuals talking that are actual, real big voices in the science community and journalism and things like that. But I wanted to play that scene because it kind of gives you a lot of different aspects and ideas of what people are thinking about Superman and Superman's big fear and issue and complex for himself.
We, as a population on this planet, have been looking for a savior. 90% of people believe in a higher power, and every religion believes in some sort of messianic figure. And when this savior character actually comes to Earth, we want to make him abide by our rules. We have to understand that this is a paradigm shift. We have to start thinking beyond politics.
Are there any moral constraints on this person? We have international law. On this earth, every act is a political act.
Is it really surprising that the most powerful man in the world should be a figure of controversy?
To have an individual engaging in these state-level interventions should give us all pause.
Human beings have a horrible track record of following people with great power down paths that led to huge human atrocities.
We have always created icons in our own image. What we've done is we project ourselves onto him. The fact is, maybe he's not some sort of devil or Jesus character. Maybe he's just a guy trying to do the right thing.
We're talking about a being whose very existence challenges our own sense of priority in the universe. And you go back to Copernicus, where he restored the sun in the center of the known universe, displacing Earth. And you get to Darwinian evolution, and you find out we're not special on this Earth, we're just one among other life forms. And now we learn that we're not even special in the entire universe because there is Superman. There he is, an alien among us. We're not alone.
Are you, as a United States Senator, personally comfortable saying to a grieving parent, Superman could have saved your child, but on principle, we did not want him to act?
I'm not saying he shouldn't act. I'm saying he shouldn't act unilaterally.
What are we talking about here then? Must there be a Superman?
There is.
So there you kind of have it where you see these various ideas and going around, and one of them is actually probably the most clear cut and the right one, which is that maybe he's just a guy trying to do the right thing. You also have this guy at the beginning that kind of again violates religion by saying, oh, they're all looking for a messianic figure. That's not true. And the reason that's not true is because not all religions, actually most religions that I'm aware of, don't actually paint the picture of a messianic figure because they don't feel like they need to be saved of anything. It's just more like you need to be saved of yourself by learning more, and that's it. So it's just like in the idea of Buddhism, you're not lost in the sense of you're separated from a being like God. You're just trying to get to nirvana. So it's very, very different. I don't know why he would say all of them have a messianic figure, because it's not necessarily true. Although if he's looking at it from the perspective of just human beings are always trying to find salvation from suffering, I suppose that can be, that can be matched up that way. But I do like the way they look at the fact that, oh, hey, look, we're projecting ourselves on this human being, on this godlike figure, and trying to make him something that maybe he's not. And I liked they have Neil deGrasse Tyson in there, who's talking about how it is a paradigm shift. Like someone says it's a paradigm shift, and then he kind of affirms it by saying, we went from Copernicus questioning that we're not the center of the universe to Darwinian evolution where we're not special beings. And now here we have Superman, an alien from another planet who's incredibly powerful and just far different than ourselves. So how do we feel about that? Do we jurisdiction him? Do we, it's like you kind of had that talk where it's like everywhere you go, even internationally, there are jurisdictions. So what about Superman? So this is Superman's issue. His issue is that he sees the paradigm shift of his existence. And he himself doesn't know how to accept it either because he has these big threats coming at him. Luthor is a reaction to the paradigm shift. Batman is a reaction to the paradigm shift. That's what they are. They're reactions to it. But eventually you find that Batman sees humanity in Superman. And that's why he turns. And the reason he sees humanity is because of Martha. Yeah, the popular thing that everyone hates. Oh, you have to save Martha. What? Your mom has the same mom. Has the same name as my mom? Oh, we can't fight then. No, that's not what it was about. I know you want to believe that's what it was about. No. What it was when he said Martha, Batman was able to connect because he has a mother named Martha. Not connect in the sense of, oh, our moms have the same name. No. Connect in the sense of, he has a mother too. He's like me. All of a sudden, his world changed. And here's Lois Lane dropping herself on top of him saying, no, don't kill him. Well, he's human now all of a sudden. You're not a man. You're not brave. Oh, excuse me? You don't think it's brave to have to operate in a world that isn't your home? To have to learn to love a people and to become a part of a people and to get them to love you most of all when you're not part of that world? You're on the outside looking in and all you want them to do is let you in the house. To treat you like you're one of them. And they're sitting here with the ability to sacrifice everything they have to save you. And you continue to treat them like the man on the outside. He is brave. He's just brave in a different way. So this is where you get the Christ-like figure. Superman realizing, I have to give these people everything. And at the end, he sacrifices himself by killing Doomsday and allowing Doomsday to kill him. And that is the big lesson for Batman because now Batman is redeemed. Luthor never gets redeemed because he never understands this. He never understands Superman may have all this power, but Superman is still a man. And maybe it might do you well to help out the guy as opposed to alienate him and try and destroy him. But it may just be that because Lex is that psychotic, he's never going to see that reality. So now I'm going to go ahead and go to a long part. It's not as long as the Christ figure clip was, but this is Batman talking at the funeral of Superman to Wonder Woman. And there's a little bit of her in there too, because she talks about, if you've seen the Wonder Woman film, then you know a little bit about how she, what she discovers and how she feels about mankind, which I kind of went over in my podcast. So here's that clip.
I failed him. Life. I won't fail him in death. Help me find the others like you.
Perhaps they don't want to be found.
They will. And they'll fight. We have to stand together.
100 years ago, I walked away from mankind. From a century of horrors. Man made a world where standing together is impossible.
Man is still good. We fight, we kill, we betray one another. But we can rebuild. We can do better. We will. We have to.
So you can see how Batman's attitude has changed about mankind, where he feels like mankind can rebuild. Now, there is a humanitarian aspect to Batman from the very start, where Batman has never been keen on the idea of there being an all-power that can help save the world. Batman is always under the assumption that you have to lean on you. He learned that from his family's death, that it's not about me trying to put myself on everyone else. I mean, or it's not about us relying on something else. It's about us relying on us. So it's kind of like when you find that person in the thread where everyone's saying pray for London, and that one guy is like, prayer does nothing. Let's make action. Let's take action. Batman is sort of like that guy where he decided long ago that we do need to take action. We do need to do something because we have to. And so that's the humanitarian aspect of Batman. It's not to say Batman's like this anti-religious kind of guy. He isn't necessarily. At least we don't get that out of him. We don't really get a good commentary from Batman actually on stuff like that. But yeah, I just thought it's just really, really interesting how he turns around at the end there, and it's due to Superman. And this is painting an obvious allegory of a man who got saved by the Christ figure. A man who received salvation because he saw what the Christ figure was capable of doing. As powerful as he was, as strong as he was, rather than remain like the Jew who thought he was blasphemous and didn't deserve to exist, he needed to be crucified, Batman managed to get saved and managed to see this man with all this power gave it all up for me. He gave it up for me. He descended from the clouds and he died for myself, for me. And that is what Batman is learning and now realizing about life. Well, that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe or follow. I'm on Google Play, YouTube, Stitcher, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Twitter, and you can even find me on Minds.com. Don't forget to check out some of my older podcasts. So I hope you guys enjoy your day, and thanks for listening. Bye.